So this is one of those Sundays when the sermon that we planned, 2-3 weeks ago, just doesn't quite feel right for this moment, where my spirit is somewhere else than where I thought it would be on this day. And that's primarily due to the verdict that came down this past week, I think it was Tuesday, in the killing, the murder now, of Ahmaud Arbery. For almost a year, since February of 2021, when the nation first heard about this case, where a black jogger was chased down and, according to the words of the perpetrators, trapped like a rat, shot, and killed. And even though the entire murder was on videotape, no one was arrested, no charges were filed. And the mother of this young man made a promise to him at his funeral that she would not stop until she had justice for Ahmaud, her son. In all of this, sometimes we lose sight of the person who was killed. Ahmaud Arbery was a 25-year-old young man with his entire life ahead of him. He was an athlete. He was a football player. He was a jogger, a runner. He was in shape. But most of all, he was a loving son to his mother. And she misses him every day. So, when the news broke this past week, first, yes, I watched not all of the trial, but I certainly watched the closing arguments. And so when the case went to the jury on Monday, and then on Tuesday, the news broke that the jury had reached a verdict after just 2 days of deliberation, as Wednesday. The case went to the jury on Monday, and news came on Wednesday morning though, that the jury had reached a verdict. I was filled with a sudden fear that another setback for justice, for Black lives, was in the offing. I knew that a short deliberation meant that the case was obvious to the jury. A quick decision showed the jury was unanimous, not hung, for either verdict, guilty or not guilty. A longer deliberation would show uncertainty, a lack of clarity, a need to still be persuaded by the prosecution. Or a delay could mean a deep division within the jurors as to the basic narrative of the case. The jury in the Ahmaud Arbery killing had a critical decision to make. Were the defendants a trio of concerned citizens in this transitioning community who were pursuing a burglar until he turned on them, leaving them no other option but to defend themselves with deadly force? Or was Ahmaud Arbery the victim of racist vigilantes who resented this black man for refusing to comply with their order to stop and talk to them? Well, the jury's guilty verdict let the world know what 99% of black folk have known all along. White privilege kills. White privilege kills. A jury verdict was rendered in spite of the criminal justice system in Georgia, not because of it. Now, some and many will be tempted to claim a victory for the American legal system for this verdict. But it seems that the bar of justice is much, much higher for black folks than for white. The very lengths to which the family and the black community had to go to, even to get an arrest, was anything but an example of equal justice under the law. Without the third prosecutor doing the job that the first one should have done, without the Georgia Bureau of Investigation doing the investigation the police should have done, and without the videotape the perpetrators recorded, we would have no justice at all. It is small solace that exactly 30 years after the video recording of LAPD officers beating Rodney King, that a video recording actually, finally, weighed in a black victim's favor. In fact, it was their warped sense of entitlement and the height of white privilege that convinced the defendants to release the video to the public. The public did not know there was a videotape. Oh, the police knew. The prosecutors knew. They looked at the video and said, I would have done the same thing. Nothing to see here. No crime. You had to defend yourself. But there was such tension, such racial tension in the community because the black community knew this did not smell right. They knew that Ahmaud was not a criminal. They knew that Ahmaud was just jogging down the street. They knew that Ahmaud had not stolen a thing. They knew that he was innocent and unarmed and wound up dead on the street on a Sunday sunny afternoon. And so the perpetrators actually said that they released the videotape to calm the racial turmoil, to show that they were innocent. They actually thought the video would exonerate them. There is not much justice in the fact that it was still possible to seat a nearly all-white jury in 2021. And as if having a nearly all-white jury wasn't enough, one defense attorney wanted nearly an all-white gallery. You heard what he said. We don't want any more black pastors coming in here. Well, sir, I resemble that remark. But I will not be deterred from sitting in a public court or jogging down a public street. But after the verdict of guilty, I still had mixed feelings. I was still reeling from trying to process what I had heard on the radio. I was driving on my way to church, and I stopped over at the Carlsbad Mall to pick up a sandwich for lunch. And as I got out of my car and was about to go into the restaurant, another black person in Carlsbad, and I say another because there are two of us. It wasn't a mirror. Spoke to me. I was going in, he was coming out. I was really lost in my own thoughts. And you know, it was a little bit startling because I could go days in Carlsbad and not see another black person. That's why I'm glad to get to church on Sunday, so I can at least see Reg and James and Sandy and whoever else shows up today. But I was still caught up in this kind of haze of what really just happened. Did we really just get this verdict? And I stepped out of the car, I didn't see him. He spoke to me and it startled me. And he said to me, "How are you feeling?" And I went into this long explanation. I said, "Oh man, I'm just really confused. I'm glad that the verdict was guilty, but it just doesn't seem like much of a victory with all that it took to get this case to where it was. I just don't know that this is really a breakthrough or not. I mean, dang, if we have to have video every time we want to have a conviction, I don't know how much justice we're going to get. So I don't know. I'm feeling just really confused. How do you feel about the verdict?" And he said, "What verdict?" I said, "Oh, you're just saying, how you doing?" He said, "Yeah." He said, I said, "Okay." No, the Ahmaud Arbery verdict came down and they convicted all three of the perpetrators. He said, "Oh, wow, that's amazing." You know, and so we talked for a bit more, and he actually lives in Carlsbad, and I gave him the card from the church. I said, "We're 10 o'clock on Sunday." But he didn't make it, but I hope one day he does. But you know, I have to be honest with you. It was really, and he even said, there are no coincidences. We were destined to run into each other. And it really did feel good to have someone there that I could look at who I immediately knew understood what I was feeling, even as difficult as it was for me to share that feeling. So I hope that we continue to grow our population here in Carlsbad. Last time I checked, we were like 0.9% of Carlsbad was black, but hopefully we can do something about that in the future. But Ahmaud Arbery has accomplished two important things in his death. One is that Georgia, one of the last states in the nation to do so, has now passed a hate crimes law. Now, they passed it too late for state prosecutors to charge the offenders in this case, but because of federal hate crime laws, the federal government can, will, and should pursue hate crimes against them. The second thing is that this case and Ahmaud Arbery's death has led Georgia to repeal the slavery-era citizens arrest law. That was the foundation of the defense, yes. That was the foundation of the defense for the murderers of Ahmaud. Now, understand, this citizens arrest law was originally passed to empower every white citizen to arrest and detain any black person that they suspected of being a runaway slave. And in the South before the Civil War, when the vast majority of blacks, but not all, were enslaved persons. If a white person saw a black person loose or free walking around, they had the immediate right to suspect them and question them, to stop them and question them. Hey, boy, where are you going? And to detain them until the slave patrol or the enslavers could come and get them. And it just seems to me that the killers of Ahmaud Arbery were doing the same thing. Hey, boy, where are you going? Stop and talk to me. Answer me. You won't answer me? You won't stop for me? How dare you? And so even after the Civil War, the law was used to continue to harass blacks by any white person who wanted to accuse a black person of the slightest crime. The McMichaels defense attorney made the claim during the trial that Ahmaud refused to stop and talk to them. Well, that certainly sounds like a crime, doesn't it? I mean, where does this list stop? Just blank while black, just fill in the blank. Standing while black, walking while black, not talking while black, talking while black, jogging while black, just fill in the blank. And these are now criminal acts. He was just running down the street, as the prosecutor noted. They said the only thing that the McMichaels knew was that they saw a black man run past their driveway. They didn't know where he was coming from. They didn't know where he was going. They only knew that he was black and that he was running. So he went and got his gun and he got his shotgun. They got in their truck and they gave pursuit. Running down the street is a suspicious behavior if you're black. I try to make sure that I am wearing running gear or walking clothes when I walk, even in my neighborhood over in Oceanside. You know, sometimes I'll say, oh, you know, I want to break off a lap or two. I don't need to change. You know, I got on my jeans and a short sleeve shirt, and I just take off walking, but, you know, I'm not sure. At least I want to dress the part. Though that doesn't always matter. Ahmaud Arbery had on tennis shoes, had on shorts, had on a running shirt, and it didn't matter. All they saw was a burglar. It is the essence of white privilege that they felt he had to stop because they told him to. And if he didn't, they could use deadly force against him. They had a truck. He was jogging. Why didn't they just follow him until he or they ran out of gas? Where is he going that they couldn't follow? Now, we only have their word for it. They testified that Ahmaud Arbery never spoke a word. But he's dead. We only have their word for it, that Ahmaud never spoke to them, that he never asked them to just leave him alone, that he never asked them just to let him go home, that he never begged for them to stop following him, that he never proclaimed his innocence. We only have their word for it, that he did not pray while they were shooting him, that he did not pray while he lay there dying. We only have their word for it. But we do have their word that the McMichael that shot and killed Ahmaud Arbery, as he lay dying on the ground, stood over him and said, "Fucking nigger." And that evidence comes from his co-defendant. That evidence, I think I blew out the system here. Did I overload the? Okay. That evidence comes from his own co-defendant. So they testify that Ahmaud did and said nothing to provoke them, but he cussed him and shot him anyway. And when they shot him, they knew every white person and institution and system in their little county in rural Georgia would back them up. And they did. The police came to the scene, didn't arrest them, were more concerned. I listened to the body cam footage, and I encourage you to do so. The first police officer on the scene did not check Ahmaud Arbery's pulse, did not render any aid, even though he was still moving and breathing when he arrived. But he spent the next 5-10 minutes trying to find a bottle of water for the shooter, to give him a drink of water and to help him wash the blood off of his arms. You can hear him. "Hey, do you have a bottle of water? I don't have one in my car. Hey, hey neighbor, can you get him a drink of water?" For almost 10 minutes while Ahmaud Arbery lay in the street dying. This is why we have to keep shouting, "Black life matters." And this is what we mean by systemic racism. The police didn't arrest him. The father of the shooter called the district attorney personally to tell the district attorney, "Don't arrest my son." And guess what? She didn't. And she recused herself but told the person she passed the case on to, "Don't arrest them." This is what we mean by systemic racism. But praise God, it finally got to a district attorney that filed charges. It finally got to a prosecutor who saw the truth. Oh, and that prosecutor was awesome. She was awesome. She tore the defense apart. In her magnificent closing argument, she reminded the jury that the McMichaels never told the police that they were executing a citizen's arrest. They never told Ahmaud Arbery he was being detained under the citizen's arrest law. And the prosecutor said, in order to act under the authority of the law, one must have immediate personal knowledge that the person being arrested committed a crime in your presence, or even within your immediate knowledge. And the only thing the McMichaels knew was that he was running down the street. And last time we checked, that's not a crime. And even at that, they cannot use excessive force in effectuating the arrest. And that because they were not legally allowed to make this citizen's arrest, and that they did not witness any crime, they cannot claim self-defense against Ahmaud Arbery. You cannot provoke a situation as an aggressor and then claim self-defense against the person you provoked. If you watch the video, and I know it's difficult to watch, of his shooting, the perpetrator is standing there at his truck, parked in the middle of the street, driver door open, and he's standing there with his shotgun with the driver door to his back. Ahmaud Arbery is running down the street, running from the other truck that's chasing him. And he sees him there with the shotgun. The father is in the back of the truck with a .357 Magnum, and he runs to the right around the truck trying to get away. And the other perpetrator runs around the truck to intercept him. They go out of view at the front of the truck, and you hear the shots. If Arbery was trying to attack him, he would have run straight at him. He ran away from him, and he turned around, chased him, and shot him. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation detective testified on the stand. The only person who had a right to self-defense was Ahmaud Arbery. And so, the jury pronounced them guilty of malice murder, guilty of felony murder for killing Ahmaud Arbery. All I could think was, where was this prosecutor when an unarmed 17-year-old boy, Trayvon Martin, was hunted down, shot, and killed by a 28-year-old man, George Zimmerman? It's the same case, except Trayvon wasn't even running. He was just walking. Oh, that's right. They didn't have a videotape. Both defenses, Zimmerman and McMichaels, claimed that the victims were armed. They actually said this in court, that Trayvon Martin was armed and Ahmaud Arbery was armed, simply because they had arms. That's what they said. They said they had arms. I mean, according to them, they would literally have to have been armless for the defense to accept them as unarmed. They said Trayvon Martin was armed with the sidewalk, quote unquote. He was armed with the sidewalk. And they said that Ahmaud Arbery was armed with his fists. And they both claimed that they were in fear of their lives from a black boy and a black man, even though it was the white people that had the guns. Don't we think Trayvon and Ahmaud feared for their lives? What about their right to life? Their right to self-defense? Well, this is a sermon. In Paul's letter to the Thessalonians, and I encourage you to read it at home slowly. I don't give you homework often, but when I give you homework, I expect you to do it. You see how long Karen read the whole chapter. It won't take you very long. In Paul's letter to the Thessalonians, he over and over commends them for their faith in the face of persecution. And he was so concerned that they might lose their faith that he sent a black pastor named Timothy to be with them face to face in Paul's place. Paul knew the comfort that can be rendered when people of faith are gathered together face to face. That's all the black ministers were doing in that courtroom. They weren't intimidating anybody. They weren't threatening anybody. They were doing what Paul sent Timothy to do, to be with Ahmaud's mother so that she wouldn't lose faith in the face of persecution. Wanda Cooper Jones, Ahmaud's mother, in spite of the persecution of her son, in spite of the persecution of the police, in spite of the persecution of the defense attorneys who justified the murder of her son because she claimed he had long, dirty toenails. Despite the persecution of all the people who said that the murder of her son was justified because he was jogging while black, she never lost her faith in God. Listen to any interview of Ahmaud's mother, and you will hear a testimony of faith that would put all of us to shame. In the midst of her grief, in the midst of her sadness, she was praying and believing and hoping that justice for Ahmaud would happen. The mother of a murdered son, and she prayed to God that justice would be had. She promised her son. She even quit her job to pursue justice full time. And she never, ever stopped praying. This is faith. Faith is what is hoped for. Why do you hope for that which you see? Faith is hoping for what you do not see. And she certainly couldn't see how she was going to get justice when she started praying. This is a faith with which we are not familiar. She believed her black son's life mattered to God, and so she prayed to God for justice. It is clear that Ahmaud Arbery's life did not matter to the police on the scene that day. It was clear that his life did not matter to the neighbors that came out. It is clear that it did not matter to the prosecutors or anyone in power. He wasn't even given the decency of some care or concern as he lay there dying. And all the attention was given to the perpetrators to make sure they were comfortable. So yes, today is the first Sunday of Advent. It is the time we look for signs of Jesus coming into the world. Maybe, just maybe, this verdict of guilty for the white murderers of a black man in Georgia is the first sign of coming justice. And that's all I want for Christmas. I just want justice. That's all. Justice for the murdered, for the shot, for the maimed black lives in America. Please, God, that's all I want. Amen.